Perfect. Okay. So, hi everyone again. I'm Jaleesa Whitley. I am the founder of Book Trips. And so, Book Trips, we create small group, book inspired journeys that take our travelers from the pages of some of our favorite novels to the places that they're set in. And we partner with local entrepreneurs, artisans, and creatives to really tell the story of the place that we're visiting through the culture, through the food, and through the place itself. And so, a little bit about me. So, I am based in Brentwood, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. What I'm most excited about for this trip, I think, is a hot air balloon. Like that, that experience of being over Teotihuacan is just beautiful, and I'm excited for other folks to get to experience that. So, that's what I'm most
That's what.
excited to. I will pass it over to Tommy. You're on the top of my screen. So introduce yourself. Where are you calling home currently, and what are you most excited about?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tommy. I'm usually based out of Astoria, Queens in New York, but I'm currently spending the month of April back home in Kansas City, Missouri. Um, the thing that I'm most excited about, I haven't been to Mexico City since 2005. And so it's like it's gonna be fun just to be back in such like a beautiful, vibrant, exciting city. So I'm just excited to go back uh almost 20 years later.
I'm gonna say you're almost having the 20-year anniversary. That's amazing.
Yeah,
It's changed so much.
I bet. I've heard it's like the place to be. So yeah, I'm excited.
Very excited. Sarah, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I live in San Diego, California. I think the most exciting thing for me about this trip is just like having a chance to learn how to travel well. I feel like I've traveled a lot, but like it's always been, I don't know, with the idea of being frugal or pinching pennies. And I'm just excited to be on a trip that's planned by Jaleesa to see like how I can do that better now that I'm 38 and can do that in this part of my life.
Or is like taking care of other folks who are usually the person planning. So really excited. Donna, you're next on my screen.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Sorry, I'm losing my voice as well. So I'm Donna. I'm based out of currently Suffolk County, Long Island. I was in Queens for 40 years. That's home, always will be home. So tell me, I'm looking forward to Queens girls meeting up. And I'm sorry, what was the other question? Because I'm working.
No worries. Just what you're most excited about for the trip.
Okay, so the books I definitely am looking forward to going to visit a library and the bookstore. I'm excited for everything else, but those are two things that I have wanted to do once I visited Mexico City.
Perfect. I have a long list of great libraries and bookstores, so don't you worry.
Okay, thank you.
Amanda, you're up next.
Hi, thank you so much for hosting. So I'm turning 32 in 2 weeks on the 19th. So this is kind of like my first venture outside of the country since I went to Ecuador. Um, so I'm really excited just to explore more of Latin America and other places because my family's from Brazil. So I'm used to the South side, but haven't explored that yet. So I'm really excited to learn more about the culture and get more of an authentic experience of Mexico because I didn't want to do the tourist route. And again, no shame against Cancun or Tulum, but I feel like Mexico would definitely is the place to be to get more culture and the experience for sure. And I'm based in Florida, Coconut Creek, which is about 20 minutes away from Fort Lauderdale. And this has been home for almost 32 years of my life, which is crazy. But thankfully, I live in a liberal part of Florida, so it's not too red zoney. But yeah, I'm excited to get to know everyone and bond and have a really great time.
So excited to have you, and happy early birthday. I'm happy this can be a part of your celebration season.
Thank you.
Angel, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angel. I am currently based out of Hyattsville, Maryland, which is literally right outside of DC, and have been in this area for I think almost over 20 years at this point now. I am most excited for the food. I wake up thinking about food and go to bed thinking about when my next meal is. And so my one of my favorite parts of traveling is just to experience the authentic cuisine. So I'm just excited to eat and drink my way through Mexico City.
Yes. These are, like Tommy said, these are my people. Food people are my people. Destiny, you're up next on my screen.
Everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Destiny. I am based out of Washington, D.C., and I am most excited for the food, but also all of the bookstores. I've been to a variety of places in Mexico, but I've never been to Mexico City. So I'm very excited to explore and really dive into the literature aspect of that city because there's a lot to see.
It is like the literary capital of the world. There's so many bookstores. So
I know. Okay, I'm so excited.
Dr. Faiza.
Hmm? Oh, okay. Sorry. It's the same to the It's
I know you're
Solero.
like, this is my formal name. Where did that come from?
I don't know why it came. Hi, everyone. My name is Zolelwa. I am based in East London in South Africa and really cannot wait to meet you all in person. And I'm really excited to be going to Mexico. I've never been to that side of the world, the American side. So I just can't wait to see the place, the culture, the people. I'm very excited. I'm on a countdown, and it just so happens that my birthday actually falls onto that week that will be in Mexico. So yeah, I can't wait.
Oh, I love that. And you have won the Traveling the Farthest award for the trip. So I'm really excited to have
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I
you.
can't wait.
Yeah, definitely excited to celebrate your birthday. And then last we have Sharice, and I know you are still on shift at the hospital. So if you can, just say a quick hi.
Hey, hey, I,
Hi.
I'm eating because I'm taking a lunch break too. So that's why I had my camera off so you guys didn't have to see me eat the whole time. Um, but yeah, so my name is Sharice. I'm an RN. I work in pediatric psychiatry, so that's where I am currently. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, which is smack in the middle of the United States. Are you from Kansas City, Tommy?
I am, and I'm in Kansas City right now.
Look at these connections.
I love that. What part of Kansas
That's
City?
amazing. I'm in South Kansas City. I'm by Bannister Mall and the
My sister lives in Grandview.
oh, look at that.
I live in Brookside, right by UMKC.
Okay. My
Yeah.
elementary school was in Brookside. This is
What?
Jaleesa.
Hold on, hold
Look at
on.
you. Look at what
What
you
is your
did. Look what you
elementary
did.
school? I need to know what your elementary school is.
Border Star Elementary.
That's where my son goes.
My mom is like right here and can hear everything.
That's where my son goes. Oh my God. I can't wait. I can't wait to
Okay.
meet you all. That's
Yay.
awesome. So I guess the thing that I'm most looking forward to is meeting Tommy. Um, outside of that, I do agree about the food. I'm very excited about the food. And I'm very excited about the museum, the Frida Kahlo Museum. I'm really excited for that too. So,
Yes,
and
yes.
I'm just super excited to be here. And I already met, is it Jaleesa?
Jaleesa, yep.
Jaleesa. I already let Jaleesa know I'll probably have to pop off because they only give us like a 30-minute break. So I'm gonna stay as long as I can and then I'll pop off.
Great. Thank you so much for joining and excited to have you. And there's some synergies and interests in cities, so really excited for this group. So we will get started. So what tonight will look like for the next 20 minutes or so, we'll go through some overviews of Mexico City, the trip itinerary, and then we'll be joined at 7 by Katie Gutierrez. So we're going to have a facilitated conversation with her and some open space for folks to ask questions. So really, really excited to get the chance to talk with her tonight. We'll go over some packing tips and tricks and have some open Q&A at the end, but the chat box is open for questions throughout the presentation if anything comes up as well. And then after our call, I will share the packing list, the city guide, with some libraries and bookstores as well, and my favorite restaurants and things like that, and some next steps. But before we get started, are there any questions?
You will have like the packing list and like all that stuff. You'll send that to us in an email too.
Yep. So they'll be sent as PDFs in an email. Perfect. All right, so Mexico City. This is one of my favorite cities in the world, and it's very, very hard for me to say to pick a favorite, but this is top 5 for me. So the architecture, the food, the culture, the libraries, the bookstores, the museums, it's really that girl. Mexico City is an icon, and I'm so excited um, to be hosting you all there. So just some general things to know. Mexico City is the capital of Mexico. Sometimes you'll hear folks call it DF, and you might have seen that in the book as well, District Federal. That's what some folks locally call it, or Mexico City. English is not widely spoken in Mexico City. It's becoming more so as gentrification increases and you see more and more folks coming from the US and other places. But I would still say practicing a few phrases in Spanish is really, really helpful. Having Google Translate and downloading the offline version just in case you don't have Wi-Fi or anything like that is really, really helpful in Mexico City. Of course, all of our guides will be English speaking. Our driver will be English speaking, but just as you're navigating generally, especially if you're trying to get street food or haggle for things, having a few phrases in Spanish is really helpful. The local currency is Mexican pesos, and currently it's about $1 to 16.5 Mexican pesos. For those in the US, your same plugs and chargers will work in Mexico as they do here in the US. But for those not in the US, you use a type A or B plug for Mexico City. Other just general notes, tipping, people often ask in restaurants and things like that, 10% is about customary for that. And Uber is widely available and affordable. So getting around is very easy with Uber. So I would download the Uber app before coming in. About our book. So, as you all know, More Than You'll Ever Know by Katie Gutierrez is the book that will be guiding our experience. So, More Than You'll Ever Know is split between Laredo, Texas and Mexico City, Mexico. And our trip will be focused on Lori and Andres and their time in Mexico City. And really, each day will be informed by a quote from those chapters of the book. And so, we'll be talking about the hidden, the underground, and desire, and all of those big themes from the book throughout the experience. So talking about the experience. So when you land, you will be met at the airport by our driver. He will have a sign that says book trips. And prior to arrival, I will send pictures of the van that he's gonna be in. We'll have your flight information to track your flights. And then we'll be communicating by WhatsApp to make sure that we can pick you up. And if there's any delays, we'll track those things. He will take you directly to our hotel, Hotel Boutique Casa Prem. It's in Juarez, which has become the like up and coming neighborhood for bars, restaurants, and different things like that. Each of you will have a solo room, a junior suite that includes breakfast. On site, there's a fitness center, a restaurant, a lounge, a terrace. So there's everything you'll need inside. It's connected to a little restaurant if you want snacks throughout the day or in the morning for breakfast. And then nearby, there's really great restaurants like Masala Imays. Hanky Panky is one of the world's 50 best bars, which is in walking distance. It's a speakeasy. There's some museums really close. And so you're right centrally located, either walking or short Uber rides from most of the things you'll want to do in the city. All right, we're getting into our itinerary. So on day 1, we will have our welcome and opening dinner. We will meet in the lobby and be taken to a private room at Rosetta, which is one of the 50 best restaurants in Latin America. And the chief chef Elena was named the 2023 Best Female Chef in the World, so we're in for a really, really delicious dining experience that I'm really excited for you all to experience. And so during the dinner, we start every book trips experience with discussion. So it'll be like a book club discussion as we have a multi-course meal at Rosetta. And so we'll have your dietary restrictions and everything like that to really craft a beautiful opening dinner experience. And so you'll see on the top too the quotes that inform each day on the slides. So day 2 is when we get into it. So I know there's a lot of foodies in the room, so this will be your day. So you'll have breakfast at the hotel. You'll have a chance for a really leisurely morning. So we won't get started until about 11:40. So if you want to visit some bookstores, libraries, is a really good time in the morning, or if you just want to relax and sleep in, you can do that. We are partnering with a local Mexican owned food tour company, and we're going to start in Centro Historico. And so this is where Lori and Andres meet at that faded wedding in right off of the Zocalo. So we're going to start our day in the Zocalo where they meet. We'll pass by the Grand Hotel where the wedding was held, and then each of our stops throughout the center will be kind of informed by some of the ways they would have walked through the city. So we have an 8 tasting day. So come hungry. There is going to be lots and lots of food. We'll try food from Oaxaca. We'll try some local food from Mexico City. We'll visit some cantinas. So there'll be a mix and match of all kinds of food from Mexican culture that we'll experience that day. And then the evening will be on your own to explore the city. Day 3, Saturday, we do have an earlier morning, and so this will be a full day in Coyoacan. And so this is for folks who are excited about the Frida Kahlo Museum. This is your day. So we'll start our day at the Frida Kahlo Museum, Casa Azul, because she really ties into the theme of women who break the rules. She broke gender norms, marriage norms, so really wanted to highlight Frida and her impact. We'll go to both Casa Azul, where Frida lived, as well as Casa Estudio, where she lived with Diego Rivera. So we'll go to both of those locations. We'll go to a local feminist bookstore in Coyoacan that's in a really beautiful location. We'll get to visit Coyoacan Market for lunch, and so that'll be included. We'll stop for some tostadas in the market. We'll visit UNAM. This is where Andres worked in the book, and his daughter Penelope as well worked at UNAM, so we'll visit there. And this is also where Lori and Andres got married in the Botanical Garden, so we'll pass by that as well. And fun fact, Audre Lorde studied at UNAM in the 50s, and so there's a really good literary tie for that experience. Then we'll end our day at Xochimilco, and we'll have a mariachi band playing a few songs. We'll enjoy some tequila on the boat and really celebrate a full and exciting day. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions about the first few days of the experience.
I have just a random one.
Yeah.
Is Mexico is it a cash city? Can we expect to be able to use cards and cash, or what do you recommend?
Good question. So I would say street food vendors, you need pesos for
Okay.
any street food that you're going to eat. But everywhere else, credit cards are very widely accepted if you're in restaurants, bars, things like that.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Others? All right. So Sunday is a free day, and you'll have the city guide, of course, which will have an overabundance of suggestions. So please don't be overwhelmed with things to do. But I would say for the free day, heading to some of the bookstores or libraries in the city. There's Biblioteca Vasconcelos. So if you've ever seen the library with the life-size dinosaur bones in it, if you've ever seen Instagram videos of that, that's Biblioteca Vasconcelos. It is amazing. If you like modern libraries, highly recommend. Biblioteca Miguel Lerdo has murals inside of the library, as well as a spiral staircase. It's very beautiful. I'd recommend that as well. For bookstore folks, there's Perea Chapultepec. So it's a chain of bookstores, but I recommend the Chapultepec location because they have a living tree in the middle. So they built the bookstore around the tree. So I would highly recommend that as one of my favorite bookstores in the city. And then Chapultepec Park is kind of like Central Park in New York. So if you just want some green space and a really beautiful place to walk around, highly recommend. And it's across the street from the Anthropology Museum if folks are looking to go there. So highly recommend that. There's a lot of amazing museums in the city. I list a couple here as well in the city as the city guide. And then speakeasies are Mexico City's thing. And so since our book is really connected to getting a taste of the hidden and the underground, I would highly recommend checking out a speakeasy and putting in a reservation before arrival because they fill up fast. So I would say at least a couple weeks before coming, if there's any speakeasies that you really want to go to, um, getting those reservations in. Hanky Panky is a top 50 bar in the world, so that one definitely recommend advance reservations. Shaman is my favorite. If you want to dance a little bit, it's like a underground. Really could not tell this is anything. It looks like it's an abandoned building, but it's a speakeasy with really great drinks and really good music. So recommend that as well. And then Brujas is a good bar. It's all women owned, and it's really trying to uplift women authors and witches and people who women non-traditional women. So I would definitely recommend that as well. But you'll have the full Mexico City guide if there's other suggestions that you need. And then our last day, so day 5, we'll start bright and early with a sunrise hot air balloon over Teotihuacan. And so we'll leave about 4 a.m. for that, but we'll confirm the time about a week before. But we'll leave about 4 a.m. to catch sunrise. And then we'll be with 2 brothers who grew up nearby, who will be our guides for the day. They're going to tour us through the pyramids. We'll have breakfast at their grandmother's house first. Then we'll tour through the pyramids. And then after, we come back to his grandmother's house for a mole lunch. And it is so, so good. If you've never had mole, I don't really like the chocolate mole because I don't do the sweet and savory together. But there'll be 2 types of moles that you can have. And I love the green mole. And there'll be a little band. It's a really beautiful experience. And so she has a 50+ ingredient mole. So this is a very unique family tradition. And they also run a pulperia. So pulque is a pre-Hispanic fermented beverage. And so we'll get to do a pulque tasting as well while we're there. And so we should be back in the early afternoon. So you'll have a free afternoon to either rest or do some more exploration in the city. And then we'll have our closing dinner in the home of Jose and Luis. They are co-owners of Tabula Rasa, so it means a clean slate. They want their home to be a clean slate, a clean place for gathering and conversation. And Luis is like a tablescape artist. I don't know how to describe it differently, but he's going to recreate the wedding where Andres and Lori met for us. So we'll have a whole spread that's inspired by their meeting. So we'll be ending where we began to close. And so that will be our trip. After breakfast at the hotel, we will have included transportation to the airport, and we'll get folks there about 2 hours before their scheduled flights. So I will pause there for any questions overall about the itinerary.
I do have a question
Yes.
pertaining to the hot air balloon. How many persons are going to ride on a balloon?
So they have balloons that would carry all of us. So
Oh, perfect.
yeah, balloons carry up to like 15 people. So our group would have a balloon to ourselves.
Okay, just know I'm super nervous. So whoever's next to me, I'm holding your hands.
I will volunteer as tribute if needed. And again, all of these are optional activities. So if there's anything that you feel that day you're tired, you want to do something else, everything is like an opt out. Everything's included, but it's based on what you would like to do. So don't feel pressure if you have a fear of heights. Even if you want to come in the morning, there's like sitting areas and things like that. If you decide, you or anyone else decide that you don't want to do the balloon, but do want to participate in other parts of the day.
Thank you. I want to do the balloon, just this nervous about it. It's weird. I never had fear of heights, but all of a sudden I do. I think because I have the knowledge of what could happen. So
Yeah, I
that's
understand. I understand. Other questions? I see some folks are already organizing a speakeasy crawl. I love that. Any other questions for folks?
Oh, yeah, I had a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I just realized that my flight, my departure flight is like 5 a.m.
Okay.
Mexico time. So I won't unfortunately be able to spend the morning with y'all on Tuesday. Is the driver able to drop me off 2 hours before? Okay.
Yes. Yes, we will accommodate all flight times. I will say you might be a little tired after the dinner because the dinner will go to about 10:30ish, but the driver will be able definitely to take you to the airport in time.
Okay. That's okay. Yeah, I'm used to staying up till crazy hours because I'm a teacher also. So that's early for me. Thank you.
No problem at all. Um, so, in our last couple minutes before some folks have to jump and we bring Katie on, so just general packing tips. Make sure that your passport has at least 6 months of validity before coming, because you could be turned away at the airport if it does not. Carry any medications, electronics, and at least one outfit in your carry on. It's very helpful, because travel has become hectic and sometimes airports lose bags. So I would say anything immediate that you need for that first day, putting it in your carry on is really, really helpful. Um, Also, Mexico City has an elevation of about 2,200 meters above sea level. So, if you have any sensitivity to altitude, I would encourage you to bring medication for altitude sickness. I've never felt altitude sickness, but some folks are sensitive to that. So, it's important to bring some just in case, and I'll have some as well on hand in case anyone feels a little bit of sickness or nausea while they're there. We will be doing a lot of walking. So making sure that you have good, comfortable walking shoes is important. Um, I would say layers could be helpful. Mexico City in May can get really, really hot during the afternoons, but the mornings and evenings can be cooler. So having like a light jacket or like a cardigan or a sweater could be helpful as we're out during the days. Um, Folks in Mexico City dress more conservatively than folks do in like resort areas of Mexico. So most folks won't be wearing like shorts and things like that. So I would veer towards more conservative dress in Mexico City. Sun protection is really important. So sunglasses, a hat, sunscreen, because we're going to be outdoors a lot, especially on the Teotihuacan Day, because there's no shade or coverage. So making sure that you have some sun coverage there is really helpful. And then bringing an umbrella. So late May is like the start of the rainy season. So we'll be um, there might be some overlap there with rain, so I would just say bring an umbrella or a rain jacket just in case to be prepared. Any questions about packing? All right, so other than that,
Would you recommend like um check bags versus carry on, like especially with thinking about a lot of the things kind of suggested? I'm an overpacker, so I'm trying to do better in my life. And like, do we need like any fancier dresses for, or kind of come as you are, that kind of stuff?
really good question. So I would say for dress up days would be the opening dinner. That would be a good chance to dress up in a more like upscale attire. Um, Other than that, it's outdoors clothes for Teotihuacan for the walking tour, wearing comfortable pants. And then at the closing dinner, if you want to wear something festive that you feel good in, whether that's a jumpsuit, romper, dress, I would say opening and closing dinners would be the chances to dress up, but everything else is pretty comfortable, come as you are. I'm going to let Katie in, but feel free to keep asking questions.
One more quick question. Does the hotel have like laundry service? Like, the second or third day, if I want to drop off some clothes, do they do that?
I will send them an email to ask and get back to you on that.
Okay. I'm trying to pack light, so I was thinking I might get to stretch my plain outfit if I can wash it while I'm there.
Totally understand. So I will circle back around and get you an answer on that.
Thank you.
Katie, welcome.
Hi,
so much
thank
for
you.
joining
Sorry, I'm a
us.
few minutes late.
No, you are perfect because we just finished going over our itinerary. Thank you so much for joining. I know some folks will have to hop off. We have some folks that work in hospitals and have some familial responsibilities. So thank you so much, Sharice, and anyone else that needs to jump off. We'll see you soon in Mexico City.
Yes, understandable. My own kids might be running in and out. They
Yes.
do not respect when I say I'm working. So
Listen, we are in their private time. This is their time now. So I'm appreciative of them giving us any bit of your time.
oh, thank you. Well, I'm so excited to be here and that you have a trip planned around the book. I mean, it truly is one of the coolest things that's happened as a result of publication or since publication. And it's such a huge honor. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. So, just to give a little overview of this next segment, I will do a quick introduction of Katie, and I'll ask a few questions about the book. I know some folks sent some questions in advance, and we'll get a chance to do an overview of those. And I know some folks in the room already are like chomping at the bit to ask some questions as well, so we'll leave some space for that. But first, I just want to say, Katie, you did your big one with this. Like rereading this, I was like, wait, is it better the second time? Like, is it possible? Because I was clued in, like I didn't know how it was gonna end. Like I was like, so what is the truth? What is the truth?
Well, that's a huge compliment. Thank you.
So I just want to say thank you so much for writing a book that gave such a rich foundation to build a trip around. I still can't believe that you haven't been to Mexico City on the ground, because I felt like having been there 3 times, I was like, wait, are you sure you've never been there? Because I feel like I'm in Central Historical. Like, what's happening? So thank you so much for giving such a rich book. To give an overview of Katie. Katie Gutierrez is the author of the best-selling debut novel, More Than You'll Ever Know, which was published in June 2022. So happy almost 2-year anniversary.
Thank you.
More Than You'll Ever Know was a Good Morning America book club pick, and Katie's writing has appeared in Time Magazine, Harper's Bazaar, The Washington Post, Long Reads, and more. Katie lives in San Antonio, Texas with her husband and their 2 kids. So thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today, Katie.
Yeah, thank you again.
All right, so More Than You'll Ever Know is split between Laredo, Texas and Mexico City, Mexico. So I know that you grew up in Laredo, but I wanted to know why Mexico City as a parallel city in the story.
You know, I think that when I started to read books by Latino writers and in particular books that involved any kind of border crossing, I was really struck by the fact, and I think that this goes to what publishing looks for many times versus what authors actually are writing and trying to get published. But I think that the traditional narrative that we see when it comes to the border is the narrative of the Mexican coming to America, right? And it's always like America, the United States is the dream. It's the place where everything, if they can only get here, will be okay. And that narrative is valid. That narrative exists, right? We see it over and over again for a reason. And it's incredibly important, and no 2 stories around it are the same. But I also felt like, you know, at least for me, like I hadn't really read a story that involved a border crossing in the other way, you know, the way of somebody who lives in a border city here who kind of romanticizes a place in Mexico, right? The way that I think the United States is romanticized in the traditional border narrative. And to me, growing up in Laredo, which was, you know, it's not a small town exactly, but it feels very much like a small town, especially when I was growing up. And Mexico City to me it felt like New York City, right? It felt like this sophisticated, cosmopolitan place that I always wanted to go to. And I think that for Lore, in the 1980s in particular, when Laredo truly was, you know, sort of a dusty small town, I think that, that is a place where I saw it being able to bring out a different side of a person, like if a person is used to a place like Laredo, used to, very much the routines of home and work and, breadwinning and childcare and all of the stresses of these daily activities, what is a place that's so much bigger going to do if you have the opportunity to go there alone, right? And what is a place like that going to do if you meet somebody in that place who also brings out a different side of you? So to me, Mexico City just felt like this really exciting kind of counterpart to Laredo. It felt like it needed to be different. It needed to be bigger. It needed to be bolder in order to sort of bring out those parts of her. And for me, I felt like it needed to be in Mexico versus somewhere else in the United States or in any other country. And again, kind of playing with this idea of like border crossing, right? Like I think that Lore is a character who is kind of constantly crossing these borders in her life, emotional borders and physical borders. And she's always kind of, you know, uh, justifying her decisions to herself and convincing herself that her choices are valid. And I think that many of us are familiar with that, even if it's not quite in like these big ways, as big of ways as Lore. But I wanted to play with that idea of like a metaphorical border crossing as well as the physical one, but like this reversal of what we usually see, and that I think also applies to the story of like the person, the spouse with a double life and a double family. Like as we know, that is typically men, and so I wanted to kind of reverse that as well. So I think like this idea of playing with reversals for me was coming up a lot. And Mexico City felt like a place where, for Lore, it could be like an Alice in Wonderland kind of situation where, down is up and so on. A place where she could really kind of live into this other side of herself. And that would, I hope to sort of be surprising to the reader too, and inspire a reader who's maybe less familiar with Mexico, or a reader who is used to hearing the stuff we're used to hearing about Mexico to go like, oh, huh, okay, like that's not really what I was picturing Mexico to be like. Like maybe that's actually, a place worth going to. So the fact that like y'all are going, is so cool, because that definitely was top of mind for me, was kind of this idea of like, yes, Mexico uh is struggling. It's always, I think, been a country that has struggled politically and economically. And living in Laredo, of course, like I'm very familiar with the many, many people who come across the border looking for a better life. And so I don't want to minimize that in any way. But I think like, with Lore and with the book in general, like I think nuance is sort of where I wanted to live with it. And so being able to present a piece of Mexico that is beautiful and fun and exciting and is able to kind of make Lore feel alive in this different way was really important to me.
I love that. And so Sarah said in the chat, one of her favorite quotes from the book was about place. And it rang so true. Places can do
Mm.
that to us, can't they? Trigger the brain into a kind of muscle memory.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I feel that every time I like, I live in San Antonio now. And so every time I go down to Laredo, it's that the triggering, right? Where you sort of become all of these past versions of yourself. Like, I always feel kind of like a teenager when I go down to Laredo, because that was, how old I was when I last lived there full time. So it is amazing what places can do to us, like a song.
Yeah. And so when you were talking about like this complexity or this nuance of who Lore gets to be when she's in Mexico City, I really wanted to talk about, for me, what's really interesting about More Than You'll Ever Know is beyond the double life, the double marriage, it's about two women, so Cassie and Lori, who deeply want to be known
Mm.
by the people who love them, whether it's their husbands, their partners, their kids. And I wonder, after writing this book, do you feel like it's possible for us to really ever be known by our loved ones? So Lori talks about sometimes her husband was too close to her to really
Mm.
understand her. And so I wondered, when you're talking about this juxtaposition of who she gets to be in Mexico City versus Laredo, do you think that it's ever possible for us to be really known by the people who love us in our totality?
That's such a great question, and I think that it's one that I'll probably keep addressing in different ways through my writing, because it's one that I am a little bit obsessed with. Is it possible to be known in our totality? I think about my kids, for example, and how, at least, of course, at this point in their lives, they're so small, they're 5 and 3. Like, I am only their mother. Like, it is impossible for them to know me in my totality, and that's how it should be, right? And I think even, I don't even know my parents in their totality, because the role eclipses the person in so many ways when you talk about particularly mothers, right? But even spouses, yeah. I mean, I absolutely, my husband and I talk about this a lot when we sort of get into these routines of complacency, and we feel like, at this point, I've known my husband half my life, and it's very tempting to feel comfortable and tempting to feel like we know each other so well, and we do. But I think travel is one way of continuing to get to know different sides of people we love. Getting to see somebody in unfamiliar environments and getting to see how they react to situations that you wouldn't normally find yourself in. I think that is such a beautiful entry point into getting to know somebody you love in a different way. I think that can happen in good and bad ways, right? Like, I think I've been in car accidents where you see different sides of the person that you're with, or actually, my husband and I traveled to Turks and Caicos, and we got stuck in a hurricane. And so it was like, well, what do we do in this situation? Who are you in a hurricane? I don't know. Let's figure it out. And so I think, I don't know if it's possible. I really don't, to be known in our totality by the people we love. I think it's possible to keep striving for it. I think it's possible with great intention, right? Like, I think that if we want to be known, have to be so intentional about letting people in, about letting ourselves be vulnerable, about, risking rejection. I think, you read, or at least I read, like, I love the letters, like Dear Prudence and things like that. And there's a lot of, I think a lot of times people have these secret fantasies, whether it's about sex or like a different way of life or whatever. And they're so scared to share it with their partners because of the fear that they will be rejected and that they'll lose the life they have together. And I think, again, very valid, right? Like, I think, like, shame and guilt and fear, like, these are all such deeply rooted human emotions and so deeply tied to our own individual pasts, and they're so hard to get past. But I think that if we want to be deeply known, and if that's important, it's also important to be intentional about putting ourselves in those places. And then also, hi baby. Something nice to me. Okay, can you go talk to your daddy about it? Yeah. Okay. Say hi. Hi. This is Jack.
Okay.
All right. Can you go tell daddy, please? Thank you.
So cute.
Flying out with airplane arms. So I think, I think in answer to your question, I think it comes down to it kind of being work, right? Like, it's work to let ourselves be known, and it's work to continue to try to know the people we love. And then we also, I think, have to be willing to hear things that we might not want to hear from the people we love if we want to know them to that extent, right? And we have to be willing to potentially accept parts of them that we hadn't seen before, didn't know were there. So, I mean, it's a scary enterprise, right? And I think that's why it's so much easier to stay in that place of complacency that I think, Lore finds herself in with Fabian. And so exciting to kind of start something new with Andres, because, that place of starting from scratch, and for her starting as a woman, right? And not a teenager the way she was when she met Fabian, and not a mother the way he knows her to be, and not a wife the way he knows her to be, but just as like an individual person. Like, I think that is probably a very intoxicating feeling once you've been in that place of complacency for a while.
Yeah, I think a lot about the motherhood role. So obviously that's central to the book. So the title of the book, More Than You'll Ever Know, comes from a conversation between Lori and her son Mateo. Is when she says, "I love you more than you'll ever know." And so the difficulties and responsibilities and really weight of motherhood seem to be central to the book. So I wondered, what kind of conversations did you hope that would spark about female ambition and the cost or potential cost of pursuing your own desires? Like, what were the conversations you hoped would come out of those things about the book?
Yeah, great question. It's funny, when I started writing the book, I started writing the book the same month I found out that I was pregnant. And in my head, I was like, okay, I got to finish this book. I have 9 months. That's my deadline, because I don't know what my life is going to look like, after a kid is in the picture, right? And that in no way happened. I mean, this book took years, to the point where I was still working on edits with my agent, right up until I went into labor with with Jack, who you just met. Um, so in the beginning, when I was pregnant and I was starting to think about my own shift into motherhood, but I wasn't quite a mother yet. Like I was pregnant, but I didn't feel like a mother. I still felt like myself. And so motherhood at that point in the process of working on the book was more thematic than this like deep emotional need to start conversations. So at that point, I thought, it would really complicate the picture for Lore if she were a mother, and how would that change the situation logistically and emotionally. But then as the years went on and I became, I had my daughter, and then, she started growing into a toddler, the pandemic hit, I got pregnant with Jack, moved into, slowly being a mother of two. I was editing it while, he was in his first, I guess, year. The book came out when he was 2. And so my own understanding of myself as a mother changed quite a lot in those years. And I think the pandemic was really kind of like a crucial underpinning of this work, because during that time I started writing a lot about motherhood. Yes. You're not feeling well. Joe's not feeling well. I know, baby. Yeah, I know. What's she doing right now? She's sad about something. Okay. Well, again, can you go find Daddy, please? Thank you. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. I had to pick up my daughter from school today. She is indeed not feeling well. So during the pandemic, I started writing about motherhood a lot in different ways. Like I wrote longer pieces about it more narratively, and then I wrote some shorter pieces that were more sort of timely and news focused, specifically for Time Magazine, and in particular about motherhood during the pandemic, which was focused a lot on how we found that mothers really bore the brunt of the pandemic when it came to childcare, right? Like who was going to stay home with the children who could no longer be in school. And even if it were, a family with 2 parents who worked outside of the home, in most cases, it was mothers who, either gave up their careers or changed their careers dramatically to be home and suddenly be teaching their children and, doing everything with their kids. I think it was something like 2 million mothers left the workforce during like the first year of the pandemic. It was something along those lines. And I was feeling really outraged about it and unsupported by the country, right? And also, of course, I had had Jack, and so I was thinking a lot about parental leave and how much we are so lacking in that as a culture, as a country, and really any kind of cultural support for mothers in this country. Like I think mothers are really kind of the underpinning of the country, and yet there's no real social support, right, for the work that mothers do. So I started writing a lot about it, and then I started getting emails in response. And one of the emails that I got said something along the lines of like I should have gotten a pandemic puppy, that, I was not cut out to be a mother, that I should have used contraception, that they were worried about my kids. And which at that point I was like out, like I just could not. But it was really amazing to me, like the response that I would get from talking about motherhood in this way. Like anything other than sort of hashtag blessed was like, you're a bad mom, you don't love your kids. Why did you do this? Like you made your choices, you made your bed, now go lie in it. Like there was such extreme offense and objection taken to any kind of discussion about motherhood. Um, as a challenge, right? And so I think like all of that really bled into the book and bled into um, what initially started as kind of like a plot point and became something much deeper and richer to me. And at the same time, like the love, right? Like I could not have understood, like I could have intellectually understood, as I think we all can, how a mother feels toward her children, right? But I could not have actually physically felt it in my body without becoming a mom. And becoming a mom and still trying to put myself in Lore's position was really interesting, right? Because I think as a writer, one of my most important roles is to not judge my characters. I have to sort of just have to follow them. And that was one of my projects for Lore, was like, could I ever come to understand a person who would make these decisions? And then again, that question gets complicated by motherhood. Could I understand a mother who would make these decisions? And what does that look like? And so I think that in the end, I really hoped that the book would spark these kinds of conversations around, what would make a mother look elsewhere for some kind of fulfillment? Why do mothers need a different kind of fulfillment? Why is it still so taboo to say that being a mother is not enough? Like that's a line that Lore says at one point, that she loves her children, but they're not enough. But try to say that to anybody and they will crucify you. So I think just having these conversations, and I'm also, and not everybody has responded favorably, right? So I get tagged in negative reviews sometimes, or Lore gets criticism in reviews, which is totally fine. Readers, like, that's part of the work and part of the project. And I'm really interested and hope that readers would kind of like interrogate their responses to her, especially around motherhood, and ask themselves, why does it feel so bad to watch a mother put herself first? Like, I think that's a really important question. And so, yeah, and I think that question kind of broadens into this bigger discussion that we're having around the lack of like support in our country for moms. So yeah, I felt like I went around and around a little bit.
That was really, really helpful. And it actually segues into one of the questions that our travelers sent. So this is just a note that we're going to open it up in a second for other folks' questions if you have them. But Tommy, who had to drop off earlier, just really wanted to thank you first for the writing, especially around motherhood and Marta's journey as someone who's struggling with her.
Hmm.
So she really appreciated that character.
Oh,
And she
I
said there's
struggled also. So yeah.
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 So she just really thanked you for giving a lens and a truthful lens to what that journey feels like.
Oh, thank you. That's really meaningful.
Yeah. So she says there's a line that I felt really crystallized Lori for me. Motherhood is the thief you invite into your home. She asks, what inspired that line and how much of your own motherhood story informed how Lori feels about hers? So you talked a little bit about that, but I wanted to make sure her question was entered into the room.
Yes, yeah. I'm so glad that that line resonated. I still remember writing that line. That was pretty late in the revision process. Like I think I was probably already working with my editor. So it must have been sometime in 2021, I would say. So it was really kind of toward the end after years of working on it. So, by that point, we're in the pandemic. We took, I mean, we were very serious about, sort of locking down. So the four of us were very much at home, kind of for 2 years. Our daughter, was just about to turn 2 when the pandemic started. And really for 2 years, like it was the 2 years after that, we were at home. She wasn't in school. My little one, I had a high risk pregnancy. And so, that the whole pregnancy was very scary. And I went to all of my appointments like by myself, and I didn't know if I was going to have to, deliver by myself. Like we couldn't have any visitors in the hospital. we got home and, the first friends who met my son, Jack, were 6 months later when Texas had that power outage and everything froze and we ran out of water and I was breastfeeding and I was panicked that like I was not going to be able to make enough milk to feed my child. And so some friends of ours who lived close by braved the icy frozen roads and came and they brought us like 5 gallons of water. And then that was the first time they met my child. And so, that's just to kind of offer some context around the time period that I was still trying to work on this book, and that kind of informed, the writing and the development of motherhood in it. And I remember when I sat down here at this desk and I added that line into a section that already existed, and I felt like the section, it was okay, but it wasn't exactly how I was feeling anymore. I just felt more, right? And when I wrote that line, it was one of those moments that's, it doesn't happen every time you sit down to write, but when I wrote that line, I was like, damn, that's a good line. Like that is truly how I feel about this. But and it's a hard, like I think the line can come across as harsh, right? It can come across as a real critique of motherhood, is something that takes instead of gives. And I think the reality is that it does both every day. I mean, I think that we lose our personal time and our personal space, and we lose aspects of ourselves. But what I've gained through my children is far and above that, right? Or it's just different. I mean, it's the thief you invite into your home, I think, is, for me, felt appropriate because it is, it's like saying, come in, take whatever you want, so it's less about the malicious taking and more about the sense of everything I have is yours. You can walk out with anything in this house and it's fine. You can walk out with any piece of my heart and it's already yours. And that's what I was kind of hoping to get across with that line, like that kind of that kind of duality that I think is so intense about motherhood.
I see a lot of nods in the group. So I'll open it up with that to some folks from some questions from other folks in the
I have one. So my favorite type of book is like books with multi-character perspectives. Those are like my jam. And so I always wonder, like, how do you get into the mindset of having to switch and tell the story from multiple characters perspectives? And yeah, how do you kind of tackle that?
Yeah, great question. I love those books too. And every time I start to write a new book, I'm like, this is the book where I'm not going to do that. This is the book where I'm going to stay in one point of view. But to me, the it's so endlessly fascinating to me how two people can perceive the same events in wildly different ways, in ways that make you as the third party question, well, what actually did happen? What actually is the truth? Like, is there such a thing as an objective truth, or is truth only the way the individual perceives the events that happen, right? And filters it through their own history and understanding. And I feel like I always go back to that when I'm writing, and I love looking at things from these multiple perspectives. But from a craft perspective, though, it is tricky at times. So for More Than You'll Ever Know, Lore's voice came to me very naturally, very easily. She was like talking my ear off from the beginning. She was the voice that I was hearing before I fell asleep at night. And I loved it because, again, that doesn't happen all the time. And so I wrote, initially the book was structured very different. So in my first draft, the first 120 pages or so were all of Lore's point of view, and it was all the 1980s sections right up until, I want to say, maybe after the first time she and Andres slept together. And then from there, I switched to Cassie for the first time. And my idea was to do the same thing, to go the next 120 pages just in Cassie's point of view. And then the last third of the book, I would start to intertwine them. So that was the first draft. And I sent it to my agent and she was like, that's not working. She, from her perspective, the reader was already so engaged in Lore's story and the stakes were so high in her story that it was really challenging to then move into Cassie, whose stakes were interesting, right? But not quite as high as, a whole double life and a murder. And so then I was like, okay, well, I'll try alternating the chapters from the beginning. And so the first restructure was to do that, figuring out how to kind of braid the chapters together in a way that would make sense. And then after that, every edit, every subsequent edit from there, it was, it was less about, I think for me, the problem was less about, keeping them straight or looking at it from these two perspectives, and more about, again, from a craft perspective, making sure that they worked together and played off of each other in the ways I wanted to. So for example, if something really intense was happening in Lore's chapter, and then we flipped into Cassie's chapter, and it's a pretty quiet chapter, it doesn't feel right to read. The reader is then, I think, like itching to get back to Lore. And I felt very strongly that I didn't want Cassie to just be like a frame character. I didn't want like the journalist figure to be the box around which Lore's story was told. Like I wanted her to be very much her own character. Like my kind of litmus test was like, if I take all of Lore's chapters and put them in one stack, and put all of Cassie's chapters and put them in one stack, I wanted it to feel like they could be two books on their own. And that was a very hard litmus test to achieve. And there were points where I was like, maybe I don't need Cassie, like maybe it should just all be Lore, because I just was struggling so much with getting Cassie's perspective to be as, I think, rich and compelling as Lore's. And so that did make me work really hard, I think, to ask myself, who this woman was and what she wanted and where she came from. All the questions that for some reason came to me a little bit more easily with Lore, I had to work a lot harder for with Cassie. And so figuring out those things and really deepening her sections, I worked on Cassie's sections a lot like that, where I would get them all together, read them straight through, work on it like I was working on its own novel, and then try to stitch them back together with Lore's. And then from there, try to deal with like pacing issues and plotting issues. It was like a mess for a really big part of the time. But as far as the multiple perspectives go and leaving Cassie in there, the times where I wanted to give her up, I always knew it wasn't right. It was just, that feeling of can I get it to be what I want it to be? And that's, I think, always an exciting and scary question for a writer. And I think it's up to, the reader to determine if I did. But yeah, I think that it was really important also to bring Cassie in as like this outside perspective once she got to Laredo, and get to see how she was perceiving Lore and how she was perceiving the events that happened both in the past and the present. That felt like a really sort of crucial part of the story for me.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have a question about something I annotated in the book, but I haven't like gone through all the annotations and tried to like put my spin on it yet. But I think every time you mention the word pleasure, I like highlighted and I put a tab on it. And I noticed this pattern that like whenever destruction was present, pleasure was present too, because like, it was the earthquake and then you had the marriage. And there's this like terrible dream that Lore has where she like dreams she's in an earthquake and she wakes up and it like reminds her all that destruction is like gives her pleasure and power like it did when she had birth. And I think I'm trying to remember, but I think there's even a quote where Cassie dreams about pleasure and destruction too. I'm gonna find it and put it in the chat. But I just was kind of wondering like where that came from, how you put it together, like maybe when in the writing process you decided to make that like a pairing, and if you just have anything to share about it.
Yeah, that's such a great annotation and question. Yeah, I think especially with Lore and when it came, so a lot about Lore's character kind of crystallized for me around when I kind of started reading about the earthquake in my research. And I saw when I read about the earthquake, and then of course, I was writing and the second earthquake happened 30 years later. I thought that Lore reminded me of the earthquake itself, or of an earthquake, or of a force of nature in general. To me, the way nature is not malicious, right? Like nature is indifferent. Nature is just doing what it does. Um, and the earthquake itself, as much as it destroyed so much of Mexico City, and so many lives, and killed so many people, it also exposed a lot of corruption within the city when it came to like all of the corners that were cut in so many buildings that were destroyed, and it forced action to be taken in certain regards when it came to like, let's perhaps build buildings a little bit sturdier. Let's not cut so many corners, because the corners that we cut to be cheap and to get the job, you know that was a direct result. So I saw Lore at that point as a force of nature herself. She's capable of great destruction, but she does it without malice. And within the destruction, I think all these different truths could be exposed. And I think that kind of juxtaposition kind of brought to light for me the idea of like pleasure and destruction, like Lore's pleasure, finding herself, being with Andres, that caused the destruction within her family, right? And playing with this idea of women's pleasure in particular, right? And what does our society fear about women seeking out their own pleasure? I think that is a really interesting question that I wanted to explore. There's also like, I think, thinking about Mexico City, and like it's early in the book, but they're at the Bosque de Chapultepec, and Andres is telling Lore that it's, the whole city is built on, this ancient lake bed of Lake Texcoco, and how it's kind of slowly sinking, little by little every year. And that was another moment where it was like, I was just kind of like, a lot of things are not apparent as you're working on them. They sort of come later in the revision process. But that was a moment where I was like, it felt so symbolic of their relationship with each other, like this beautiful thing that's built on a very faulty foundation, right? A foundation that could sink and fall at any moment. And yet at the same time, where they were standing, in the park, like that park is, I think, like, if I'm remembering right, like 1,700 acres or something. And the trees, like it's made to be like an ecological space for Mexico City, which is obviously deals with a lot of pollution, but the trees are meant to sort of replenish the oxygen for the city. And so I was seeing Andres as kind of being that for Lore. And so I felt like this book for me was so much about playing with like these opposing pairs of things, like these and looking at the tension between them. And so I think like pleasure and destruction, or pleasure and pain, like I think was very much um wrapped up in that for me. And I think like looking at for me, like I think one of the ways I was trying to kind of explore that was through these like elements of nature in the book. But I think that it circles around that question of like, what do we fear about a woman being selfish? Why is selfish a bad word when we're talking about women? Why is it wrong for a woman to seek pleasure if that pleasure is not directly correlated to like her roles in the family? So yeah, great question. I don't know, I always feel somebody, Rebecca Mackay, she was giving a talk, I think, or I don't remember where I heard her say this, but she said that, I think it was in a podcast, and she said that 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 bad books start with answers and good books start with questions. And I really liked that, because I feel like that's true, at least for me in my reading experience. Like you can always tell when you're reading a book that's like trying really hard to make a point. And I think for me with this book, it was just like I had so many questions that I wanted to explore. And so I don't know that I have answers, right, for some of these questions. And I think that it's so much for readers to arrive at their own answers for. But I think even kind of like excavating these things, like surfacing them, like that's exactly what I wanted. So it's really yeah, it's beautiful to hear.
So we have just a few moments left, and I'm really interested in hearing about your research process. So there's the peso devaluation, there's the earthquake. There's NAFTA and Reagan. So you have built this whole world around what's happening in Mexico City and in Laredo, Texas. So I really wondered about what your research process looked like. And then selfishly, um, I know you've done a lot of research about Mexico City itself. So if you had your ideal literary tour of the city, what would you eat, see, and do in the city?
Okay. Okay, so research, I think for me, started with my parents because I was born around the time of the Bessel devaluation. And so I grew up with with their stories of that time period and the downsizing they had to do. And my dad, so at the time, well, and he still does, he owns an electrical supply store. And so for a time, I think it was like 2 years, he was living on and off between Laredo and Austin. And he would like sell fans from his car and he was sleeping on warehouse floors and showering in gym showers. And it was just really, just trying to do anything to kind of save the business, right? My mom was teaching at the time and then she was pregnant with me and it was a whole thing. And so I grew up with just yeah, kind of these stories of of sacrifice and hardship during those years that were kind of fascinating to me. Well, not kind of, but that were fascinating to me as somebody who kind of like my 20s were a very different experience than like my parents' 20s, right? Which was when they were going through these things. And so I think that I was really like that felt like such a rich point to start the story, especially, again, dealing with like these opposites, right? I always saw Lore as like this woman who wants more, more, more. And it seemed really interesting to me to set her in a time and a place of lack, right? And what does that do to a person who wants more? Um, so I think that the research started with asking my parents a lot of questions. And then it was really just, it was just talking to people, like a lot of talking to people who lived in Laredo during those years, talking to people who know a lot more about banking than I do, which is, not a lot naturally. And then, because I do write nonfiction, I do tend to be a pretty heavy researcher in general. So it was like really searching out archival articles from, local regional newspapers, as well as the New York Times, as well as Mexican newspapers. And then, looking like YouTube turned out to be like, I never use YouTube really. Like my husband is always on YouTube learning how to do stuff. And I never think to go on there. But during the process of writing this book, it was like a treasure trove because there was all of this news footage from the 1980s that I was able to find. And it was particularly after the earthquake. And so being able to see some of that firsthand, was really powerful. And then there was a photographer that I worked with when I was working on a story for Texas Highways magazine. And we were chatting back and forth a bit about the book. And he was like, "Oh, actually, I was there during the earthquake and I took photos, would you want to see them?" I was like, "Yes, absolutely." So he sent me these just like stunning emotional photos after the earthquake that really kind of led me down a road with it. For example, and then as far as Mexico City went, it was a lot of, again, talking to people who were familiar with the city, people who'd lived there. It was a lot of satellite imaging on Google Maps and trying to figure out, what was the same, what had changed. Like I was very aware that like this was going to be a weak point. I didn't want somebody who was from Mexico City or really familiar with Mexico City to be like, "Oh, this girl just went on Google and she thinks she knows everything." Like I really wanted to do everything I could aside. And the thing is that I had always planned on going. And then my pregnancies were very rough. And then the pandemic hit. And then it was published. And I was and so it was always a point of regret for me, that I had never been, and a point of like fear that I wouldn't have gotten it right. But I did work very hard through all of those different angles. And then once it's interesting because I think that as when you're working on nonfiction, the research is so it's so fact-based, right? And it's objective as much as you can be. But with fiction, then it was kind of like, okay, how do I filter all of this research through the eyes of these characters? So kind of looking at, as an example, like there was one point where Lore and Andres were going to be eating dinner, and I was thinking, what would they be talking about? at this meal, right? And maybe they wouldn't even be talking about it on the page in the scene, but I felt like I needed to know what was in the Mexico City newspaper at that time that they would be concerned with, because that would affect how they're feeling going into this meal and how they're talking to each other and what's important to them in these moments. And so kind of trying to ask myself questions like that throughout the process, not just what's happening, but how would these people filter what's happening and how would it impact their interactions with each other and with themselves? Like those were kind of like the zoomed in question that I used to make sense of the research, if that makes sense. And then a literary tour of Mexico City. Okay, so if it's book based, like I feel like I want to do this one day. Is just kind of like follow Lore's footsteps through the city. So it would have to start at the Gran Hotel in the Centro Histórico. Yeah, like I was obsessed with pictures of like the stained glass and the iron elevator. So definitely starting there, ideally with a room that looks out at the Zócalo. There's so much to see and do, obviously, in the Centro Histórico, from the Templo Mayor, which I think now is the cathedral is there in its place, but there's also like a temple museum as well, and you can see certain points of where the temple used to be. And actually, I wrote a few things down in preparation here. Okay, so yes. There's, I think, the Museo de Bellas Artes, and then the Museo de la Ciudad de México, the Museo de Estanquillo, and that last one, the Museo de Estanquillo, I'm interested in that one in particular because they sometimes have exhibits around or by Jose Guadalupe Posada, and he's kind of known as like the father of Mexican printmaking. So if you've seen like the skeleton imagery around Dia de los Muertos, he's the one who created and popularized that. And he did so much more than that. He was sort of, at the time of the Mexican Revolution, he was sort of like the king of making these broadsides that were telling the corridos, the stories of what was happening in the revolution, right? And so he would write the corridos and he would do a print on them, and then these musicians, would basically learn the corridos and they would sing the stories in the different like plazas. And that was how people got their news. And so, yeah. So I would be so interested in seeing his work in person. Like that would feel really meaningful to me. And I think the museum mostly contains like it's a pop culture collection by the essayist Carlos Monsiváis. And so it includes like photos, paintings, movie posters, comic strips. So I think that would be very cool. And then, of course, I need to get a drink at the Opera Bar. And I feel like, I've Google imaged like that place to death. And I feel like I've been there. I have such a sense of it that I would almost be scared to ruin it for myself. I'd have to go during like a very particular time. The light would need to be right, just really set the scene. But that would be a must for me. Of course, the Bosque de Chapultepec. So that's the park is built in several sections, as y'all know from the book. But I would also just, really just kind of want to walk around, do the Lore and Andres thing, albeit maybe not at 2 a.m. And then I would want to spend some time in the Roma neighborhood. And so that's where Andres lived at one point with his ex-wife and their kids. Oh, there are tears. And the neighborhood was destroyed by the earthquake, but now it's known to be like very hip, lots of restaurants and boutiques and shops. And that's, I think, the neighborhood that Lore really fell in love with. And I think I could see myself falling in love with it too. So
I totally understand the kids to go to.
what is it, my love? No. My mommy. No, my mommy. I'll be off in a.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So sorry to hold you. And actually, I will just say thank you so much for your time. I think the kids come first, so I won't hold you any longer. Just thank you. I see in the chat that folks said they can feel the impact of the oral history on this book. They felt the authenticity. It was tangible. And so I just want to say thank you so much. So thankful for your writing and excited to walk in Lore's footsteps in Mexico City. So hopefully we can stay connected. I know there's some
Yes.
folks who wonder the best way to contact or stay connected with you.
Yeah, you can, if anyone wants to stay connected, I have a website, which is just katiegutierrez.net, or you can always email me directly. It's just my name at gmail.com. So yeah, and also, yeah, on social media, I used to be really big on Twitter. I am not so much anymore, but I am on Instagram as Katie Gutierrez Writer. So that's also a place you can stay connected. But yeah, thank you all so much. Sorry for that final interruption. I'm like sweating. Yeah, no, it was such a great talk. You all asked wonderful questions, and I'm so excited for you to do your trip. And I hope that you'll, tag me in photos, reels, whatever you all do there. I would absolutely love to see, your itinerary and, how you guys are experiencing the city. That would just be amazing to see. So please do that.
We'll definitely do that. Thank you so much, and I hope the little one is okay.
He's fine. He's just in a real tantrumy phase, but it is rough.
Understood.
Yeah. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Thank you all so much for hanging out and for your great questions. We just have a few minutes at the end here for any reflections or any additional questions about what's coming next on the trip. Questions? Well, I will say, as far as next steps, coming up is your flights and your emergency contact details. So those will be due April 23rd. So just in a few weeks, having those booked. After this, I will share a copy of the recording, the slides, the packing list, and the city guide so that you'll have all you need to feel really prepared for the trip. And I will also start a WhatsApp group that everyone will be added to where we can continue the conversation. So if there's any questions that come up that you didn't get to ask today, we'll have the WhatsApp group for that. And then on the ground, that'll be our main form of communication on a day-to-day basis. But with that, here's 6 minutes back to your night. And thank you so much. Next time I see you, we'll be in Mexico. Have a good
Bye. Bye.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.